Whatever you want to talk about. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Talk about whatever I want to talk about. I think when you talk to people about U.S. involvement in U.S. foreign policy, try to appeal to their self-interest rather than to their high moral, good feeling, charity feeling, like be nice to other people in the world. Many Americans can't do that because they've been frightened out of their wits. And when people are afraid, they're not going to be kind. If they fear that you are going to do something terrible to me, or going to do something to me, they're ready to surrender their rights, they're ready to follow the leader, they're ready to bomb the hell out of you and kill and destroy every one of your houses that are standing, if it means making their hearth and home and their children and themselves safe. So to say to them, bombing these other people is bad and you shouldn't do it. In fact, I don't want to underestimate people, because at times when they see there is a lot of killing, they do get turned off and they do start asking questions. Why do we have to be there? Where is Yugoslavia? Why are we suddenly bombing and killing people? Why are we dropping depleted uranium in the Danube River, which is drinking water for 30 million people? And why should we be doing those things? And Bill Clinton had to really knock out Yugoslav media to make sure that they continued with their campaign to demonize the Serbs and tell you about the wicked, murderous Serbs and all that, and then to demonize the Libyans and Gaddafi, and then demonize the Syrians, and demonize Iran, and demonize North Korea. The world is full of demonized people if you listen to our leaders. And that is in order to get the support of the people behind the building of a world empire, which involves the systematic destruction of things. Now, the empire that the U.S. has built consists of about 400 or 500 bases around the world, maybe more. Some say 700 bases. It depends on how you define a base. And all of that, we're told, is needed to protect us. We need to be protected because there are people who are jealous of us, or because we're prosperous, we're secular, we're this or that. It used to be the communists were after us. I remember that all through my school years. Communists here, communists there, communists in Hollywood, communists in your schools, communists go and get your mama, you know. Communists were everywhere. And then when these ruthless, bloodthirsty communists who were just drunk and driven for power and wanted power, when they disappeared, when they resigned their governments without a shot being fired, there was a lull there. There was a terrible period where the empire had run out of enemies to justify its existence. And then finally, thank God, pretty soon came terrorism. The terrorists, and the Muslim terrorists especially, and Al-Qaeda. And yet Al-Qaeda is being used by the U.S. in Libya to destroy the Gaddafi government. It was a government, by the way. You never heard that term used. It was always the Gaddafi regime. Like today in Syria, it's the Assad regime. They give you the words to demonize the leader. And the policy is to demonize a leader. Noriega in Panama, suddenly he was an admirer of Hitler. They found one copy of an old Life magazine in his headquarters, which the cover had Adolf Hitler on it. So it's Life magazine loved Hitler, it seemed. And they started telling you how he was a secret admirer of Hitler. And this justified George Herbert Walker Bush bombing El Sharia, working class district in Panama, and invading and occupying Panama. Panama's real sin was that it had a leftist military. Panama's real sin is that it developed social programs for the ordinary people in education and well-being. That's what Panama was doing wrong. Panama's real sin was that they wanted to own the canal zone, which cut right through the middle of their country, and they didn't want the U.S. telling them what to do. And that really is what happens. What the U.S. does is they demonize the leader of a particular country. One week it's Noriega, terrible Noriega, we all heard about that. The next week is Saddam Hussein. The very same Saddam Hussein who was torturing and murdering and killing people a few years before, but he was killing the right people. He was killing communists, he was killing Democrats, he was killing constitutionalists. When he was doing that, and even wiped out the whole left wing of his own Ba'athist party, when he was doing that, he was Washington's poster boy. They loved him, they kissed him, they had their pictures taken with him and all that. It's when he got out of line on the oil quotas and he wanted a larger oil quota to sell more Iraqi oil, which would have threatened prices, too much oil glut, the prices go down, profits go down, and George Herbert Walker Bush suddenly started talking about Saddam Hussein as worse than Hitler. You see, worse than Hitler. And so he was demonized. So that's the process. It's a very rational and very consistent process. And what it does is it plays upon people's fears. In that November, just before the Gulf War, the polls showed 75% of the American people were against getting militarily involved in the Gulf, in Kuwait, and against Saddam Hussein. They started then putting out polls about if Saddam Hussein has, the term weapons of mass destruction hadn't come into vogue yet. They said, if he has nuclear weapons, would you then support? Well, yeah, if he's going to destroy the world, would you support stopping him from destroying the world? Is that a loaded question or not? And the polls went the other way. Suddenly, 75% of the people supported intervention in the Gulf War. So they've learned to play on the survival fears of the American people, convince the people that there's a world out there that's encircling us all the time and about to get us. And this is why we, unlike every other country in the world, we, unlike China, unlike Russia, unlike Denmark, unlike Spain, we need to have these hundreds of military bases all over the world. We need to have these nuclear aircraft carrier fleets floating around in every ocean and making port in almost every region of the world to protect us from these imagined and conjured enemies. It's a very consistent U.S. policy. Do not join those critics who say U.S. policy is stupid. It's so foolish. It gets all mixed up. Why do we keep getting into these silly messes? It's stupid. You're stupid if you think the people who own and run this country are stupid. They do this and they're very consistent. And the consistency is they always attack anyone who wants to use the land, the labor, the natural resources, the capital of his country for self-development. And that was Saddam Hussein's sin. That after he did all this murdering and torturing and all that, and the U.S. loved him for a while, he then refused to privatize the economy. That economy was totally state-controlled and owned. Iraq had the highest standard of living in the Middle East. He suddenly took on the policies of the very people he had just killed, and he was seen now as a nationalist. Saddam Hussein's sin was that he committed economic nationalism. Noriega's sin in Panama was that he committed economic nationalism. Assad's sin in Syria was he was modernizing, he was putting out a social wage, he had social programs. The refugees that came from Iraq and Libya, he gave them full benefits and such. He was using the resources of his country for the well-being of the people rather than to make the world safe and profitable for the Fortune 500. And that is what it's all about. That empire that is being built, so much bigger and stronger, there are a whole bunch of, there's a bunch of literature, lots of books coming out. Chris Hedges, others, Chalmers Johnson, who's dead now, but he wrote a couple of, it was all about the twilight of the empire, the dawn of the end of the empire, follies of empire, the decline of empire and all that. It's not declining at all. This empire is getting bigger and bigger. It's got monster bases now in Eastern Europe, in Kosovo. It's got bases in Kyrgyzstan. Its budget is doubled under George Bush, and it's increased under Obama to record heights. It gets about $1 trillion a year money. The empire is stronger and bigger than ever, and people are being frightened as much as they can be frightened. And the trick is to, and we should also remember that this empire feeds off the republic. This empire gets its money and its wealth from the republic. Every tank, goes back to Eisenhower's speech, every tank, every plane, every drone and all that means one less school or library or health clinic or the like. We have a republic that is sinking down to third world level. We have a republic that's closing its public clinics. We have a republic that can't even build decent housing for its people in its communities. We have homelessness. You come look at Berkeley. It's interesting. The part about Berkeley they don't tell you. They always talk about the left, the tradition. You walk downtown Berkeley. It's like walking down Skid Row. The number of people standing around needing help, needing housing, and such. So that's what it's about. The goal. It's a very rational, very consistent goal. It attacks any leader, whether he be a dictator or democratically elected like Milosevic was, and demonizes that leader to convince you that this is the worst devil that you could ever see, and we've got to get rid of him for humanitarian reasons and for our own security. And any leader who uses the land, labor, and resources of the country for communal purposes and for collective needs, that guy is sooner or later targeted. And it supports any leader, democratically elected or dictator. It doesn't matter. It's where he stands on this line. If that leader opens up the country and says, "Come on in, boys, it's all yours. Come on in, the land, the natural resources, the labor. I can get you workers who will be working for you for pennies an hour. You just give me, my brother Jose, a little money. You just pay us off. Or today it might be my brother Abdul. Pay us off, and we'll take care of these people if they get out of line, and we'll be your proud allies and good friends and all that." And that's what it's all about. So. Let me just end by saying that what people believe the U.S. is doing in the world, and what the U.S. really is doing, is one of the great propaganda feats of modern times. And so what we have to do is bring to people the information that is very consistently being kept from them in the major media. Thanks. I threw a lot out at you in just 10 minutes there, but you get what I'm saying. I know you do.
Thank you, Dr. Parenti. Thank you. We live in the heart of the beast. I turn it over to Savvina Chowdhury.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so I just wanted to first say thank you to Olympia Movement for Justice and Peace and to the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the Evergreen State College for putting on the People's Movement Assembly, which is becoming an annual Olympia tradition, because I think these gatherings are really, really important. I think it's wonderful that we come to these, attend these, talk to each other, connect with each other, and learn about our struggles and learn how to form alliances. So I have a tough act to follow, following Michael here with his very easy way of speaking about so many important things. But my task today is to talk about 3 national instances of the state of the struggle. So I'm just going to focus on 3 brief descriptions of struggles that I see are of importance in the national sphere today. And I'm hoping that I won't take up too much time so that we have more time for discussion. So the 3 that I want to focus on today are the protests against tar sands oil, a struggle for our environmental for our environment. Secondly, the September Chicago Teachers Union strike. And lastly, the Occupy movement. The first one, tar sands, the struggle for our environment. So during August 2011, over 1,000 activists were arrested in front of the White House to protest the attempt by a Canadian company, TransCanada, to build a pipeline to carry tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada, to Texas. Protesters also testified at the State Department hearings about the pipeline, and for a time, perhaps because of Occupy, charged atmosphere, in January 2012, President Obama denied, or perhaps we should say delayed, until the November elections, the permit for the construction of the northern part of the pipeline. Since January, however, the Obama administration has approved TransCanada's plans for the southern part of the project, and the corporation has begun building the lower section of the pipeline using eminent domain to clear landowners in the way of the pipeline. This has led to ongoing direct action to stop the construction of this part of the pipeline. In a protest now entering its fourth week, Democracy Now! This week reported that dozens of environmental activists working with local Texas landowners have blocked the pipeline's path with tree sit-ins and other nonviolent protests. There have been multiple blockade events where individuals have taken risks to stop construction sites, shutting down constructions for days at a time in isolated incidences. So you might have also heard about the actress Daryl Hannah being arrested, as well as a 78-year-old East Texas farmer, and she was arrested while protesting the clearance of her land seized by eminent domain. Whoever wins the elections this November may well approve the international section of the pipeline once it is rerouted. This is one of the struggles at the national sphere that I think we need to think about and talk more about and give more of our attention to. So the second instance that I wanted to touch on is the September Chicago Teachers Union strike. And I think of this one as a much more hopeful one. So faced with a series of top-down policies to reform public schools, on September 10th, 2012, 29,000 employees of the nation's third largest school district began a 9-day strike. Among their list of concerns were their opposition to the policy of merit pay. This is the policy that ties teacher evaluations and salaries to student performances on standardized tests. They were also protesting layoff policies, so up to 140 schools in the city of Chicago are slated to close down over the next coming period. And Chicago has been closing down dozens of public schools and replacing them with charter schools, many of which are then turning to hiring non-unionized teachers. And so I think there's a lesson here for us in Washington State as we look at the charter school initiative that's on our upcoming ballot. The strike is considered remarkable for a number of reasons. So one is that it was successful in the sense that the union won a double-digit salary increase over the next 3 years. However, they also had to make compromises, and so whether teacher evaluations and job security will be tied to performances or not was one of the compromises they had made. And so now only part of their salary will be tied to standardized tests. But the strike also drew attention to the way public school teachers are vilified in the mainstream media. And so here I think it's instructive for us to remember one of the things Michael talked about last night about the self-legitimating myths of the 1% he mentioned, right? The way the 1% goes about framing our reality, the way we think about what we do, the way we think about the work that we do, our place in the world, the way it frames our definition of reality, and to remember that the media is the media of the 1%. Whether you look at the way the New York Times, The Nation, or the NBC Today talked about Karen Lewis, who is the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, or whether you look at the way the mainstream talked about unions in general, you can get a sense of the way teaching and unions are vilified in the mainstream media. Another reason why the strike is considered a remarkable instance of a struggle in the national sphere is the fact that unions have successfully proven that they can fight the privatization of the ruling class's onslaught on our private sector. So the strike itself drew attention to the fact that the Chicago Teachers Union is a model of bottom-up rank and file unionism, which is an interesting alternative to the a proliferation of bureaucratic labor movements. And so I have a quote here from Diane Ravitch. She's a historian of education who ironically used to favor standardized testing, but has now changed her position on it. She says that the strike is about the heart and soul of public schooling, the deprofessionalization of teachers, excuse me, and the ways that the education crisis nationwide has been co-opted as a means of pushing privatization as the be-all and end-all solution to the achievement gap. Schools are not businesses, children are not widgets, and teachers are not robots or machines. The third and last instance that I want to bring up for discussion today is the Occupy movement, the criminalization of dissent, and the struggle for democracy. So this is a big title, and I'm just going to scratch the surface. So the Occupy Wall Street movement started on September 17th, 2011, with a group occupying Zuccotti Park in downtown Manhattan. And as word of the occupation spread, similar occupations began across the country. Many of them designated October 15th as a global day of action, holding teach-ins, general assemblies, and forming smaller working groups that focused on addressing both the specific needs of the tent cities that came to be known as Occupy villages, as well as larger national issues. On October 16th, President Obama actually issued a statement supporting the movement. But many community leaders, unions, activists, academics came out in support of the movement. However, as Occupy became more militant in many cities, including cities such as Seattle, Portland, Oakland, and New York, the villages themselves were forcefully evicted. After the dismantling of various sites, Occupy activists focused on other direct actions, including a November 3rd general strike in Oakland, California, the West Coast port shutdown, and later the May Day general strike, or the strike for Immigrants' Rights March in Seattle and Portland. In the aftermath of May Day, the federal government has targeted anarchists in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere, imprisoning 2 members of our community here in Olympia for refusing to testify before a federal grand jury, a move that is, in effect, criminalizing dissent, criminalizing the holding of anarchist beliefs in general. So this year, on September 17th, Occupy Wall Street celebrated its first anniversary at Liberty Square, and 158 people were arrested. And so though the movement itself may no longer have a physical presence in our downtowns, in my mind, I do see the Occupy movement as having shifted public discourse around. I'm going to talk about just 3 different instances where I see a shift in the public discourse. And so I see this as a deepening awareness of specific collective currents. So one collective current where I see this deepening happening is the increasing polarization in this country between those who have access to accumulated wealth and those who don't, those who own their homes and those who don't, those who have access to health insurance and those who don't, those who in general have access to the better paying jobs with benefits and those who don't. So the Occupy movement, with its emphasis on the 99 versus the 1%, which I think is problematic in many ways and simplistic, nevertheless, it does bring wealth inequality to the forefront of public discourse and debate. And along with it, it brings along this whole discussion around how the 1% controls our media, frames our conversation, defines our reality, and so on. Secondly, a second collective awareness that I see deepening with the Occupy movement is a questioning of the hallowed myth of social mobility. That many in this country continue to lose their homes, find themselves deeper in debt, or find that they owe financial institutions more than the current market value of their homes, are starting to question this myth of mobility that we have in the US. Still others face defaults on their mortgages as they attempt to pay off their medical bills. Similarly, a generation of young people now face possibly years of debt servitude as they are faced with student loan repayments that are coming due in a period of high unemployment. So not only is the July 2012 unemployment rate of 16.4% for 16 to 24-year-olds, twice that of the overall national rate, but we have also been moving toward a job market that is increasingly characterized by the proliferation of part-time work, contingent work, low-wage work. In Europe, the term precarity has been used to describe this increasingly precarious life of the new working class. So there is increasing awareness of the way debt now functions in our economy as a form of dispossession of our homes, our savings, our wages, and ultimately taking away the mirage of the American dream, a rude awakening for those who thought they had access to this mobility, the middle class. The abolition of the student debt, therefore, is one of the calls of the Occupy movement, but I do think personally that they need to broaden their analysis to be more inclusive. Last but not least, I think the Occupy movement has deepened our collective awareness that our modern democratic institutions are insufficient to deal with the challenges of neoliberal capitalism. I think that increasingly people are aware that the multiple and ongoing crises that we face will not be solved by the coming elections, that democracy is about a lot more than voting at the voting booth for political parties, and that building participatory democracy from below in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in all our institutions can be rewarding, though very difficult, work. The Occupy movement showed us very starkly that in order for us to transform our society, our institutions, and ourselves, we still need to learn much from each other in terms of how to go about unlearning sexism, racism, ableism, xenophobia, homophobia, and so on. In order for there to be a cohesive 99%, to use Occupy's terms, there's still much work to be done in terms of constructing a carefully examined and principled unity among a working class that has been historically divided and pitted against each other. Without these bridges across race, class, and gender divisions, our struggles for social justice will remain fragile. So I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to Sarah.
So, Sarah Regan.
Well, good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk on behalf of some of the local things that are going on in Olympia, some of which are movements, some of which are projects, all of them good things. I'm going to start out by just talking about the localization, not occupation event that we had a couple weeks ago that I organized with another friend of mine, Bruce Wilkinson. And our idea, so the name in itself, I think people were really uncomfortable with because it said not occupation, right? Well, we're actually in the solidarity with the Occupy movement. And the idea was localization, not occupation of Afghanistan. It was the 11th year anniversary of the occupation in Afghanistan. And we wanted to bring that back into awareness. I mean, after 11 years, that's just too long. And I think people are letting themselves sort of forget what's going on over there, and it's war every day for them. And so the idea is we wanted to localize, instead of maybe trying to push our politicians or go as individuals and try and do work, we want to start localizing the groups that we have here. We have so many different groups. We have Fellowship of Reconciliation, Veterans for Peace, National Organization of Women. No, yeah, I think that's right. We have wonderful people like these two and all of you. We have all these different resources of information, of ideas, and things that we can bring together. And that's what we did on October 7th, 2 weeks ago. And even though there wasn't a terribly great turnout, I talked to a lot of people that said, wow, this is really awesome. I feel like I'm included in this. And that to me was enough for me to want to continue working on this idea. So we're going to continue writing some things about this idea of localizing power and building grassroots power with all the different organizations that can start bringing their resources, their experience together. And so while I was working on this, I was trying to say, well, what other things are going on? I needed to figure out, well, who else is doing what? Who can we bring in? Who can come and join us? And somebody told me about the Thurston County Progressive Network, which is our tcpronet.org. and you can go on there and you can find a calendar of all the different things that are happening in the Thurston County area. One of the things that is on there, one of the ongoing things that they have in there is the peace vigils. And that is on Wednesdays, every Wednesday from 12 to 1, and Fridays from 4:30 to 6. They've been doing this for over 30 years. I don't know if anybody knows exactly when that was started, but so at least though the peace vigils at noon have been going on for a long time now, and you can go out there. Glenn Anderson with Fellowship of Reconciliation, he's got like a pile of signs, and he's out there just about every Wednesday. You can go out there and you can pick up one of his signs, and you can just sit there and be a part of that community and wave to people. And I know that when I go out and do that, it feels really good. It's really good. It's a really good thing, a continual thing that we can do here in Olympia. The other thing that Glenn Anderson actually is a part of is the Thurston County Television, TCTV. And right now, this month is Nonviolence in the Real World. This is what the theme is for this month. And I'm just going to read just a little excerpt from what they say about this. Nonviolence offers a third way. Instead of fight or flight, we can use nonviolent strategies and methods to oppose what is bad and replace it with a just and humane alternative. Nonviolence can require as much courage and risk as violence. This is, for example, Gandhi and King. Nonviolence recognizes that the methods we use will sow the seeds of the new society we create. We seek a peaceful and just society. We must use peaceful and just methods to achieve it. So that is at 1:30 p.m. every Thursday and 9 p.m. Oh wait, no, on Monday at 1:30, Thursdays at 9. And then I'm just going to move through. I think I need to move through a little bit faster here. So another really cool thing, I think one of the coolest things that's going on in Olympia right now is the cash mob. And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with that, but just like the flash mob, right, where people kind of jump in and they start dancing somewhere, this is something where they are, so their mission is to empower communities to engage in cultural relationships with the natural world as a means of sustaining efforts of environmental, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was the wrong one. Okay, sorry. So the idea is for a large group of people to meet at a designated time and date at a small locally owned and operated business to spend some money, usually $20 or so, to give that business a financial lift and some free publicity. And so it's kind of fun because they won't tell you until like 24 hours before the actual time, and then everyone can go in there and spend money. It's just a great way to build up those local businesses that might be struggling. Another big one, of course, I think most people in here probably already know about this, is the Thurston Public Power Initiative. PSE, which I think if you live, in this area, Puget Sound Energy is a private company that provides power for your house and is actually an award-winning company for its sustainability efforts. But they also have a huge ownership stake in the 8th largest coal producer in the country, which is located in Montana. And the rates that they have are the highest in Washington, actually. They're more expensive than the surrounding countries who are getting their energy from from PUDs. The benefits of having public-owned power would be lower electric rates, more reliable service, good jobs for local workers, millions of dollars of utility revenue reinvested locally rather than leaving its profits for a foreign-owned corporation, citizen control of local energy policy. I want to mention also that we're one of the 4 states that actually has passed an initiative to make it possible to even attempt to localize utilities, which is kind of cool, and I think that we should be taking advantage of that and moving forward. So that is going to be on the ballot. It's your choice, but I'm going to vote yes on Prop 1 there. The other thing that I found when I was doing the localization, not occupation, was I met up with this man, Doug Mackey. I'm sure some of you are familiar with him. And he's working on the Global Days of Listening project. And we had the opportunity to have a live Skype conversation with people in Afghanistan. And they actually started this, it was called the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers. And they reached out and they wanted to make friends with people in America and tell them of their experiences. And so I think on the 21st of every month, they have these live conversations, and you can go check it out. It has live. It's streaming live. Also, I talked with Doug about possibly doing more of these talks, inviting people of the community to just get together and be on these talks all together. And it's really inspiring to hear what these people have to say, and it's really shocking. Well, it's not terribly shocking as much as it is great, or not great. It's interesting to hear how their struggles are so similar to ours in this country. Of course, we're not experiencing sort of the devastation as much as what they're experiencing, but there's a lot of similarities in our struggles, and it's really interesting to be a part of that conversation and connect those dots. And then I'm going to wrap it up a little bit. I'm going to say that Media Island, I see Rick Fellows is over here, and he's on the board for that. And that place is, this is a great place. It's a house, actually, right across from the library. And they've got all kinds of, they've got a library in there of books and CDs and videos. And you can go in there anytime and pick it up and check it out. But also, it's a great place for, some of the organizations around here have meetings there, and there's some people have offices set up there. And what's really awesome is you can go there and you can watch, maybe like they have the presidential debates up on the big projector, and you have, instead of watching this at home, by yourself, you can watch it with your community. And it's really just nice to be able to be in a situation where you can experience this with other people and have the ability to have conversations. And then, so there's all these other things that I could talk about that I'm not necessarily familiar with. The Stonewall Youth is empowerment for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth, and I think they're doing really excellent things. I don't know if they're going to be here today, but they're worth checking out. Interfaith Works, I see Julia is up here as well, and I'm not really sure what you guys are up to now, but I think that one of the things they're doing is aiding the people of homelessness in Olympia. Parents Organizing for Welfare and Economic Rights, The Power, Fellowship of Reconciliation, Veterans for Peace. There's all kinds of different things. Many, many ways to get involved in Olympia, and there's an awesome community here. And of course, this event right now is brought to you by the Olympia Movement for Justice and Peace. And as I know it, they started, this group was initiated after the attacks on September 11th.
First code for in 1991.
Oh, is it really? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So the idea is to move towards peace and justice by doing things like what we're doing here, and we're getting together and we're having discussions and we're talking about how we can move as a group from the mass people. Anyway, thank you very much.